Attention bowlers, we are going to get started. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. From Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire, this is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. My name is Steve Kelly, and I will be your host, guide, friendly voice, and companion unobtrusive during this Class B North match between today's challengers, Jake Morrill of Boutwells in Concord, New Hampshire, against the home bowler Paul Metivier of Nashua, New Hampshire, bowling at Leda Lanes. And we're going to start on lane 31 with our away bowler, Jake Morrill. Jake Morrill's first time bowling at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Jake Morrill, normally from Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire, where he calls his home house. His record for the season is 61-79 as of January 8th. His season average is 103.86, which is the 29th highest in B class as of January 8th. Jake Morrill will be taking a 10 box to start out his first box, his inaugural box at Leda Lanes. Not a bad box to start with. Jake Morrill's average variance is around 8.4. Lowest is 103.0, highest is 111.4 as of January 8th. He ranks third in B North Division 1, ahead of Rob Brown and behind John Alosa and Joe DeAlmeida, aka Moose, as of January 8th. Lane 31, Jake Morrill's opening ball. Still getting a little bit used to the lanes of Leda Lanes, which are not dissimilar to Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord. But Jake is still just getting set here. He dropped 5 on his first ball. Second ball missed wide right. 1, 2, 5, 8, and 9 pins remaining on the deck for a 10 box on lane 31. Jake Morrill. He will take a 9 box. Putting him at 19 after 2. Your score update here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. If you're just tuning in, this is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, a season-long series of one-on-one Candlepin bowling matches between challengers organized into classes and divisions competing for playoff contention. Jake Morrill on lane 31 just misses the pocket to the right side, taking the 3 pin and a whole bunch others with it, dropping 6, leaving the 1, 2, 4, and 10 pins, plus a piece of wood in between the gap of the 1, 2, 4, and 10 pins. Jake Morrill for a spare on lane 31 misses the head pin, leaving only the head pin, staring him down for another potential 10 box. Morrill 31, he will take a 9 box off of lane 31. So Jake Morrill, third place in B North Division 1, head of Rob Brown, head of John Alosa, behind John Alosa and Joe DeAlmeida. His high single is 142. His high series is 570. As Jake Morrill hammers a strike right through lane 31. That was a hammer. It only took him 3-ish boxes just to get warmed up. 3 boxes plus a ball, and that extra ball was the strike for lane 31. Jake Morrill is off to the races here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. So as I was saying, his high single is 142. His high series is 570. He has 22 strikes, 105 spares, 102 tens. Jake Morrill for a double. Misses the right side, but he'll take a 7 fill for the first box. First ball, that is. Dropping 7, 4 horsemen left side minus the 4 pin. The 1, the 2, and the 7 left with wood should be an easy spare. And welcome to Leda Lanes. That was the right kind of shot in the 1-2 pocket, but the piece of wood just kind of got lost in the left side channel with a piece of wood joining it. He will settle for a 10 box, though. That's a 9 fill total and a 10 box. That puts him at, by my account, 57 after 5 for Jake Morrill, his opening half of the first game of a 5-game match today between Paul Metivier and Jake Morrill. Jake Morrill, our away bowler. Paul Metivier, our home bowler. Paul Metivier is 58-54 for the season as he throws his opening ball on lane 31. Nice little pocket shot. 9 plus. It's just going to be 9. 8 plus, I might remark. Leaving only the 8 pin on lane 31 with some tricky wood. That wood may be deceptive. It depends on how it shakes out. but Paul will take a spare. Opening box is a mark, and so far he's batting 1,000 for marks. Paul Metivier, 58 and 54 for the season. He's been bouncing back in the B North class after having a bit of a rocky start. His season average is 106.2, 23rd highest in B class as of January 8th. Paul will fill that spare with 5 4 horsemen left side plus the 9-pin. His average variance is only about 4. Lowest is 104.5, highest is 108.5. Paul Metivier for a double spare, and he doesn't quite complete it. He leaves the 4-pin on the deck. He is overall 4th place in a very competitive ACST B North Division 3, behind myself, Steve Kelly, Dominic Palladino, and JJ Turigny, that is, as of January 8th. So he's fighting in a very, very competitive and busy division, Paul Metivier, but he still averages very well, 106.2. Paul took a 10 box in the second, dropped second in the first ball of the third box here in the opening half of the first game here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour Class B North. Match between Jake Morrill, our away bowler, and Paul Metivier, our home bowler. Paul Metivier's high single is 136. His high series is 581. Paul Metivier hitting a little full in the 3-pin. Takes the 6-pin as a courtesy, but leaves the 10. I didn't think the 6-pin was actually going to go. Paul will settle for a 10 box, which is not any loss of pins by any stretch of the imagination. Here's where we are at after 3 boxes for Paul Metivier and 5 boxes for Jake Morrill. Your score update: Paul is at 35 after 3. Jake Morrill is at 28 after 3. Jake Morrill really caught fire with that strike in the 4th. Paul misses to the right of the head pin again. Seems to be something both Jake and Paul have been doing so far. We'll see if that keeps up. Paul, lane 31, connects with the pocket. Really pretty shot, but leaves only the 9-pin on the deck. Pins just danced all around it. Paul for a 10 box. He's been very accurate so far with those 10 boxes. He'll add another one for his third 10 box in a row. Paul Metivier has 21 strikes, 80 spares, and 79 tens as of January 8th. His perfect box percentage is 45. Seasonal total pins, 4,248 as of January 8th. 13 out of 40 of the games he's played have been under 100, so that's a pretty low number. Paul Metivier drops 9, 5-pin goes late, and will the 10-pin go late? 10-pin is wobbling, but it won't fall down. It's like a weeble, but he's got a piece of wood or two in front of it. Let's see what Paul Metivier can do. See if he can sit on a mark. And I will wait for the bowlers to make... Up to you. Your call. All right. We will call that a good spare after a brief debate. I told him, I said, I don't want to be the influence on any of that. I said it could have gone either way in my opinion. We'll give it to him. Paul takes a spare to end his half. And Jake agreed that it looked good. So, you know what? That's what we're going to call it. So Paul ends on an open 55 and 5, while Jake Morrill opens his second half on lane 32 with a 3-drop. Jake Morrill. Lane 32, he's trying to get a curve started onto the head pin. Can't quite get it started just yet. Jake Morrill has 22 strikes, 105 spares, and 102 tens for the season as of January 8th. Perfect box percentage of 46. And that looks like that will be a 5 box for Mr. Morrill. Correction, that was a 6 box, not a 5. I can't count today. Jake's still hunting for that head pin on lane 32. 5 pins up, 5 pins down this time, confirmed. Jake had a really pretty ball that did connect with the head pin in the 1-3 pocket, but not enough to take out the entire left rack of the 1, 2, 4, and 7. 2 and the 4 pins remaining. Jake Morrill will take that 10 box. For 73 and 7 for Jake Morrill. Strike really powering this game so far for him. 73 and 7, he normally averages 103.86. Another mark or so, and he'll definitely be on target for going above average. Lane 32, there's that strike we were just talking about, that mark for Jake Morrill. 83 in 8 for Jake Morrill. 103.86 for his average, and I think he's definitely going to overtake it now. As he remarks, the lane couldn't even keep up with how well he was throwing and how fast he was throwing. So Jake Morrill is now working on a strike in the 8th box and the 9th box to finish the 8th box and start out his 9th box. Jake Morrill, lane 32. This is the pocket to the left. First fill ball is a 6. 4 horsemen right side this time. 1, 3, 6, and 10 pins for Mr. Morrill. Jake Morrill's second fill ball is going to be 3 additional pins. Can't quite connect to the head pin, as that is the only pin left on the deck. Jake Morrill's perfect box percentage is 46. Seasonal total pins 51.93 as of January 8th. That'll be a 9 box for Jake Morrill, putting him at 101 in 9. 2 strike game 1 so far for Jake Morrill. His very first string at Leda Lanes, documented here on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour in a live stream of all places. Jake Morrill's opening ball of the final box of the first game on lane 32 is another pocket shot and another strike, his 3rd strike of the game. He's throwing him and making it look really easy at this point. Jake Morrill stands at an open 111 after 10, really salvaging his game and sailing him over his average now. 2 balls to go for the fill. Let's see if he can get 2 more strikes out of it. Seasonal total pins 51.93 for Jake Morrill. Lane 32, first ball fill is going to be 3 so far. Let's see if he can pick up another 7. See what Morrill can do. This is a fill. It's a 7 fill total. And by my account, that should be 118 after 10 for Mr. Morrill. A very impressive first game here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. This is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, Class B North. Jake Morrill just completed his first string, sitting at 118 after 10 boxes. Paul Metivier at an open 55 half, filling a spare. This is a bonus ball right here. It'll be a fill. And it's going to be, oh goodness, a 3 fill for Paul. It felt like so many more fell. But alas, that was a better ball, connected with the pocket, taking out all but the 8 pin in the back row for Paul Metivier. Paul now going for a 10 box, and he's going to get that 10 box. So after a disappointing 3 fill, he takes a 10. He's at 68 and 6, which is still technically higher than where Jake Morrill was at the same point in the game at the 6th box. Jake Morrill is at 63. Paul Metivier is at 68. Paul gets a couple more marks. We might have a game here, folks. Paul connects with the head pin, but the pins dance around a little bit. The 2, the 5, the 7, and the 8 pins on the deck with some wood. Favorable spare shot opportunity for Paul. Let's see what he can make out of this. He takes out everything but the 5 pin. 5 pin staring him down. I believe that is the first time today we are seeing the 5 pin staring down a bowler. And a piece of wood doesn't quite take it, but it's wobbling, and it's still wobbling. And he's going to give up on it. That's going to be a 9 box for Paul Metivier. That 5 pin just refusing to go down, as if it was Elmer's glued down to the deck of lane 32 at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Paul Metivier hasn't had a match with fewer than 5 spares this season as of January 8th. He hasn't had a match with fewer than 7 tens this season as of January 8th. Paul drops 7, leaving the 4, 5, and 7 pins on the deck with wood. Somewhat difficult shot, but he has a piece of wood on the right that he might be able to redline. It looks like he's going to take exactly that approach, but the ball sails behind the pins, and the pin piece of wood didn't do much for him. The idea of that shot is to careen the ball to the left to take out the 3 remaining pins. I believe that's going to be an 8 box for Paul Metivier, putting him at 85 and 8. So Paul started out hot with a bunch of 10s and a bunch of spares, but he's starting to cool off a little bit, and he's going to definitely need a mark to catch up with Jake Morrill's bombastic 3-strike first game, 118. Paul connects with the 1-3 pocket, drops 9 after 1 pin falls late, leaving only the 10 pin. Piece of wood that, frankly, I wouldn't play. Just go straight for the 10 pin. Paul will try that, and his ball curves a little bit too much to the left. Doesn't get the spare, but he can still get the 10. 94, 95. It's going to be 95 after 9 for Paul with that 10 box. With 1 to go. So at this point, Paul is going to need multiple strikes to get anywhere within the stratosphere of Jake Morrill's impressive 118 first game. And Paul, that looks like that's going to do it, though. Paul does not connect with the head pin. He drops 7, taking out the 2-4 pocket, leaving the 1, the 3, and the 8 pins on the deck at lane 32 at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Paul for the spare, a little full shot on the 1-3. 8 would do it, but doesn't take out the 8. Takes out the 1-3. 1 pin dances around, doesn't take the 8 pin. Paul will miss the 8 pin for a 9 box. That's going to be a 104 for Paul Metivier. Your score update after 1 game so far. Jake Morrill takes the first game with 118, up by 14 against Paul Metivier's 104. At Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire, and Jake Morrill will be moving to start the second game. Yep, that is correct. Just confirming the scores, since we are not bowling with any electronic scoreboard today at the center. We are just bowling with paper and with what I got, and Paul just walked over to make sure that I had those correct, and I did, so yay me. Jake Morrill in lane 31, he drops 5, taking out a few more with an awkward split. Spread eagle minus the 3 pin, 2, 4, 7, 6, 10, leaving the 2 and the 10 pin with wood. That's going to be a 9 box for Jake Morrill. After 1. And it looks like we might need to pause for a possible lane clear. Hello, I would like to apply for a job as both streamer and lane clearance manager. Lane 31, Jake Morrill, he drops 7 again. He's leaving the 1, the 2, and the 9 this time. Sort of a mirror image version of what Paul Metivier had earlier. Lane 31, he misses the pocket, hits the 9 pin and a piece of wood, but it does take out the head pin, and a piece of wood rolls back to potentially take the 2, but it just gently rests against it. Jake Morrill will take a 10 box. After 2, here at the start of the second game here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. If you're just tuning in, welcome to the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. If you don't know what's going on, let me clue you in. This is a season-long series of one-on-one candlepin bowling matches between challengers, organized into classes and divisions between New Hampshire and Massachusetts, competing for playoff contention. This is the B North half of the conference. Thank you for checking out this ACST match between Paul Metivier and Jake Morrill. Jake Morrill, our away bowler, who drops 6 in his first ball, takes 2 more out, leaving the 1 and the 3 on the deck. Everybody involved here, from the bowlers to the staff you cannot see behind me, all appreciate your viewership and your interest in this live stream, as well as candlepin bowling as a whole. Jake Morrill has 27 after 3 after that 8 box. If you live in the area and or are willing to make the pilgrimage, the Candlepin bowling community would absolutely appreciate your interest and visitation. Check out candlepin.org and click Go Bowling to find your nearest center if you would like to give this unique regional sport a try. Jake Morrill connecting with the pocket, hitting a little bit too full, dropping 7, 4, 7, 10 split for Jake Morrill. See what he can do. This is a possible spare if he hits it right. 4 and the 7 go. Piece of wood rolling towards the 10. Will it go? It looks like it's going to sail just in front of it. Not quite get it. Jake Morrill for the 10 box. That's going to be a 9 box for Jake. As he says, nope. To which I agree. That's going to be a 9 box for Jake Morrill. 36 in 4. As he goes to roll his 5th box, which will be the last one before he sits when we switch bowlers to Paul Metivier. Jake will drop 7. He's been having some trouble connecting with the head pin today, leaving the 1, the 2, the 4, and the 9 pins on the deck at lane 31. Again, missing the head pin, takes out the 9 pin. The 1, the 2, and the 4 pins for Jake Morrill for a 10 box. 7, 8, 9, or 10 here. It's going to be, wow, a really hilarious 10 box. Hit the 3 pins from the 4 pin forwards. Piece of wood sort of dominoing everything down. Jake Morrill has 46 after 4. Just 8s, 9s, and 10s in the first half. No marks yet. Paul Metivier's turn now on lane 31 at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Paul Metivier, lane 31, connects with the pocket, leaving the 3, 5, 6, and 10 pins on the right side of the deck. Paul Metivier hasn't had a match with fewer than 7 10s this season as of January 8th. He has never bowled a match without a strike so far. He has never given up all 14 points in a single match, except for one game. Except for one game, he always totals above 500. That's going to be a 9 box for Paul Metivier. Sorry, to be clear, he has never given up all 14 points in a single match. And then separately, except for one game, he has always totaled above 500. In case I smeared those together. Recently, Paul Metivier was bowling against John Alosa in his previous match in round 8. Paul Metivier drops 8, leaving the 8 and the 10 with some wood. He took 10 points to John's 4 in round 8. Every game was over 100 for Paul, averaging 106.2. His first and fourth games were over 130, 132, and 136, respectively. Paul Metivier just waiting on some wood to clear. Let's see if we can get a closer look at that. According to official ICBA rules, you technically need to be waiting for the wood to fully stop moving before you can throw your next ball. So it's not only a point of analysis, it's also a point of following the rules. And this pin is going to settle now. It is legally on the deck. Paul Metivier for the spare. Pretty shot. I wouldn't have done it any differently except maybe redline that frontmost piece of wood, but he will leave the 8 pin. He's going to go for the 8 pin, and he's going to miss the 8 pin for a 9 box. 18 after 2 for Paul Metivier. His home house is Leda Lanes. He's from Nashua, New Hampshire. He has been a manager at Market Basket for more than 33 years. That's longer than I've been alive for those keeping score at home. He's married to Stacy Metivier since 2010. Paul Metivier on lane 31 at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. He misses the pocket to the right, leaving the 4 horsemen left side, 1, 2, 4, 7, and 9 pins left on the deck. Paul, lane 31. Right on the head pin, but a little bit too full, leaving the 7 pin. No spare for Paul, but he can get a 10. 9 or 10 box potential for the conclusion of the third box. That's going to be a 9 box for Paul Metivier. 27 after 3. 27 after 3 for Paul Metivier compared to Jake Morrill's 27 after 3. Opening up the 4th box on lane 31. Again, missing the pocket to the right. Four Horsemen seems to be the name of the game, the theme, the most common denominator today. 1, 2, 4, 7 pins for Paul on lane 31. Working on a possible spare. And again, missing the pocket. I don't know if it's the yips or what, but both Jake and Paul have been doing this. Leaving the center pin, the head pin, the 1 or the 5, but in this case just the head pin, the 1 pin. It's going to be Paul Metivier's 4th 9-box in a row. 1 to go, 36 after 4. Here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Opened in 1959, roughly 64 years ago. Leda Lanes is a family-owned and operated Candlepin bowling center located in Nashua, New Hampshire. Founded by the late Edgar and Ray Simoneau, passed down through Sean Howard, Linda Howard, and Alexis Booley, along with Dave Simoneau, Matt Susi, Joe Booley, and countless other hardworking folks. They maintain a busy center with lots of leagues, cornhole, birthday party options. And by the way, there's a second bowling alley here, too, called Leda's Lighthouse, located right across the parking lot. Second building specifically tailored towards glow bowling and birthday parties. Paul Metivier breaking a streak of 9s. He's going to take an 8-box for 44 in 5. Real struggle for both bowlers. The marks seem to have dried right up here. So Jake Morrill is going to see what he can do now on lane 32 to start his second half of the second game. See if he can remediate those 8s, 9s, and 10s he got in the first half. Leda Lanes' main building features all wood approaches and all wood lanes. Sensor-based automatic scoring. The outgoing score software was known as ProScore Plus version 25, but that's currently being removed in favor of Cubica AMF automatic scoring systems. Jake Morrill, man, really struggling with a 5, 6, 7, 10 split, no wood. Missed it on the spare, and he's just trying to get anything to get something higher than a 6-box, but it's going to be a 6-box for Jake Morrill. Five, 6, 7, 10 split is a really awkward shot to make if you don't have any dead wood to work with. Leda Lanes is in the midst of a renovation right now. You might notice these spiffy, shiny touchscreens in the middle of the 2 pairs of lanes we're bowling out of today. That is the new system. That's the Cubica AMF automatic scoring system, but it's currently just inactive because there's still some maintenance going on while the sensors and the resetting mechanisms and the scoring systems and all that are just calibrated. You know how it is when you release a production system to a production environment. You don't have a test environment. It's a little bit tough to figure all that out. It's going to be a 9-box for Jake Morrill in the 7th for 61 in 7. I bowl Monday nights here at Leda Lanes, and we bowled with this system for the very first time, and it is functional. It works mostly great. Just have to work out a couple issues with just timing in terms of when it registers a score after a ball is thrown and the gap of time between the first, second, and third balls thrown. And just figuring out all the usual software glitches and all that. It's a difficult computer science problem to solve, Candlepin bowling scoring. Jake Morrill connects with the pocket and still can't really get anything out of what I would have considered a really good spare shot, leaving the 2, 4, and 5 pins on the deck on lane 32. Takes one more out for the road. That's going to be an 8-box, leaving the 2 and the 5 pins on lane 32. That's going to be a 69 and 8 for Jake Morrill. Bit of a sleepy second game here. No marks so far from either bowler. But things definitely will get moving here. Jake Morrill had a bombastic first game, 118 versus Paul Metivier's 104. Opening ball lane 32, an explosive miss on the right side. Doesn't hit the pocket, but a bunch of pins go flying everywhere. 1, 2, 7, and 8 pins with wood on lane 32 for Jake Morrill. Spare opportunity, but the ball does not connect with any pins. Whiffs the head pin to the right by about an inch or so. Third ball is going to be a 9-box, leaving only the head pin. Leaving away the head pin feels like a phrase that I've said many times today, but it seems to be what's actually going on. The head pin or the 5 pin being left on the deck for a 9-box. Jake Morrill on lane 32. That ball seemed to be a bit of a misfire, missing the head pin to the right, dropping 3. Morrill, lane 32. Misses to the left, but kicks forward a little bit, leaving all but 2 pins. Somewhat merciful pocket shot on the 4-7. And he will salvage it for a 10 box. That looks like that's going to be an 88 for Jake. Rather unusually low scoring game for Jake Morrill. But then again, Paul Metivier is also having very similar struggles thus far. So I don't know what it is. Both bowlers bowled over 100 for the first game. With the second game, there seems to be some conflict on these lanes for both of them. I don't know if it was something they said to the pins or what, but we're going to find out what's going to happen here. Lane 32 for Paul. His first ball drops 5. 1, 2, 7, 9, and 10. That is an interesting array of pins left on the deck. He connects with the 1-2 pocket, leaving the 7 and the 10. Oh, 10 pin fell late. A very late fall for the 10 pin. See, that late fall was something that the Cubica software needs to be very specifically calibrated for. It's going to be a 9 box for Paul, as he says 9, as the ball connected with the pin in the gutter before connected with the 7 pin, so that's officially a foul. But late pin falls are something, it's a phenomenon that happens in Candlepin and not so much in 10 pin. And if you're using a 10 pin scoring system that is being converted for Candlepin, you need to make some pretty hefty adjustments for those kinds of factors. The Cubica AMF on Max scoring system is primarily for 10 pins, so some delays and latencies may need to be set to account for that Candlepin. Paul drops 7 in his first, leaving the 2, 4, and 7, and then takes out just the 4 pin in the middle, leaving the 2 and the 7 for an 8, 9, or 10 for Paul Metivier. It's going to be a 10 box for Paul. His first 10 box of the game, breaking out of the purgatory. That was 8 and 9 for Paul. 63 and 7 versus Jake Morrill, 61 and 7. Both bowlers are going to war for what seems like not so much. They're definitely trying hard to take stuff out. If these opening balls have anything to say about it, Paul will drop everything but the 7 and the 10 with wood. Piece of wood hanging out where the 1-3 pocket, 1-2 pocket was. See if you can redline that and take it. That's going to be a spare for Paul, and the first spare of the second game for either bowler. Open 73 and 8 for Paul Metivier here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Paul Metivier normally averages 106.2 for the season. Looking to fill the 8th box with something more than 5, and I think I may have spoke too soon. That's a 3 fill for Paul for 76 and 8. Let's see what we can do with this. Right side half Worcester, straight direct full punch of the 3 and the 9 pins. 1, 5, 7, 6, and 10 left on the deck for Paul Metivier. Lane 32, Paul Metivier is going to take out everything but the 5 pin, leaving just the 9. Leaving the 5 pin and taking a 9 box for 85 and 9 for Paul. He has taken the second game, as long as he doesn't throw a 2 box or lower. I would say this is fairly reasonable to say that he has taken the second game, but we shall see. Good luck, Paul. Lane 32. Pocket shot, that will do it. That's a 9 drop, leaving the 5 pin, just like in the last box, but this is after the first ball. Paul Metivier could use this spare to help regain the match lead. He will take a spare for 95 and 10. Taking the game by 7 so far. Jake Morrill holds on to a match lead of 7. If Paul can take a 7 fill or better, he'll be right back up there against Jake for the match for the all-important 4 points for the total. And it's going to be a 6 drop. Jake will retain that lead by 1 for the match, but he will take the second game, both bowlers taking at least 1 game apiece. Paul Metivier concluding the second game with 101 after 10, and Jake Morrill concluding the second game with 88 after 10. We'll pause for just a moment to confirm those scores, but that is where we are at the moment based on my unofficial scoreboard here. Jake Morrill up in the match by 1. Paul Metivier up in the second game by 13. And I can confirm those are the correct scores. We are going to start out the third game now. Jake Morrill on lane 31. Real peppy first ball there. He felt good about that one with a little descriptive woo from Jake Morrill, dropping 8, 6-10 with wood left on the deck. Misses the 6, connects with the 10. Jake Morrill for a 10 box on lane 31. Misses that too. It's going to be a 9 box for the opening box of the third game for Jake Morrill. For 9 after 1. Here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Leda Lanes features 36 lanes, 18 on each side of the house. I believe lanes 1 through 18 are actually from Winnipeg's Gate City Bowl, which used to be on the Daniel Webster Highway in Nashua. Donated and transplanted to Leda Lanes after the former alley closed. Based on a 2011 Nashua Telegraph article, this expansion occurred in the early 1980s. Jake Morrill fighting for a spare on the left side, left side 4 horsemen, taking out the 2 and the 4, leaving the 1 and the 7. That will be an 8 box for Jake Morrill. 17 after 2. Based on a 2011 Nashua Telegraph article, the expansion of Leda Lanes happened in the early 1980s or so. Gate City Bowl was next to a duck pin and later 10-pin alley called United Bowling Center, and that was later renamed as Nashua 10-Pin Bowl, closed in 1995. And Jake Morrill finally gets a strike. First strike not seen since the first game. That's going to be an open 27 after 3 for Jake. Jake is doing really good with the strikes when he's on the headpin and on the pocket. And he says he broke the lane. He didn't break the lane. Sometimes if you just throw balls fast enough with not much time in succession, the pin loader just needs a little extra time to load the pins behind the scenes, something you can't see to a bowler. Or to someone who doesn't know, it might look like the lane is broken, but the lane is just taking extra time to get the pins back up through the system and reload. It's going to be a 4 fill for his first ball fill. Second ball fill is going to be 2, 3 more for the road. That's 7 fill total. 34 after 3 for Jake Morrill. Jake Morrill averages 103.86 for the season. It's going to be a 9 box total for Jake Morrill in the fourth. 43 and 4 for Mr. Morrill. High single 142, high series 570, accurate as of January 8th. 22 strikes, 105 spares, 102 tens, 46% perfect box percentage for Jake Morrill. Dropping 6 in the opening ball of the 5th box, leaving the right side diamond to the 3, 5, 6, and 9. This is a WCVB favorite, the Don Gillis Diamond. Jake Morrill versus the Diamond. The Diamond wins again, leaving the 6 pin. Jake Morrill audibly frustrated by that one. Diamond shot is difficult to get, especially at Leda Lanes, where the pins can be a little bit more stiff based on the temperature of the house. It's a little bit chilly in here today. That'll be a 9 box for Jake Morrill, 52 and 5. Certainly better than his previous half. But with only 1 strike and 9s and 8s otherwise, it definitely leaves room for Paul to catch up. We'll see what Paul Metivier can do now. Paul Metivier, Leda Lanes, Nashua, New Hampshire. Currently 4th place in B North Division 3. That's my division. He's behind JJ Turigny, Dominic Palladino, and myself in that order. Paul Metivier is trying to catch up to me, first and foremost, as I'm 3rd place, and then Dominic Palladino, who's in 2nd, and JJ Turigny, who has had an outstanding win-loss record this season. Paul Metivier drops 6 in his opening ball, misses the pocket for the 2nd, leaving the 1 and the 8 pins on the deck. Paul working on a 10 box. He's going to get an 8 box. To start out the third game. 8-1 for Paul Metivier versus 9-1 for Jake Morrill. Your score update after one box in the third game. Appreciate having you along here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. This is kind of like the NFL of singles matches in the Candlepin bowling world. No teams involved. That would be the Friday Night Pro League, which will be streaming tomorrow night. And if all goes well, that will be myself and Paul Grant teaming up down in Central Park Lanes in East Boston, Massachusetts. The Central Park Lanes 2 versus Academy 1, if I recall correctly. Check that out tomorrow night on Candlepin Bowling Network. Paul Metivier, lane 31. He's going to take a 10 box. After chopping wood, getting it down to 2 pins left on the deck after the second ball. The 1 and the 2 pin, and then taking out that 1 and the 2 pin for a 10 box. 18 after 2 for Paul Metivier. 3 boxes to go before we switch back to Jake Morrill. In the third game here, Paul Metivier will punch straight out the middle. The traditional 4-pin spread eagle, leaving the 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 10 pins on the deck. This is a difficult spare leave to get. Paul Metivier will elect to try for the right side pocket to get it. And he is somewhat successful, but he leaves the 2 and the 4 pins on lane 31. That'll be an 8 box for Paul Metivier. 26 after 3 for Paul versus 34 after 3 for Jake. Jake had a strike at this point in the match. Instead of a strike, Paul had a spread eagle. Sometimes that just happens at Candlepin. Paul did hit the head pin on the first ball, but instead of a strike, he just punched directly out the back. This time, Paul misses the head pin to the right side, taking out the 3, the 9, the 5, and what appears to be the 7 pin. For a spare now on lane 31, you needed to hit the 1 and the 2 pins for that to work, but Paul hits the 2 pin directly instead. Chopping wood ever so again. That's an 8 box for Paul Metivier, putting him at 34-4. Paul Metivier hasn't had a match with fewer than 5 spares this season. And I feel like the more I say that, the more that stat is going to break. That sort of happened against JJ Turigny the other day too, so maybe I should stop coming up with these creative statistics because they seem to be immediately disproven the second I write them down. Paul Metivier drops 7 after 1 ball on lane 31, leaving the 3, the 6, and the 10 pins on the deck. Metivier's spare ball just barely misses the 3 pin by my account, I would say centimeters. Metivier versus the 3 pin. That 3 pin wins. That's going to be a 9 box for Paul. After 5. Officially at the halfway point here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, halfway through the third string. 43 for Paul Metivier versus 52 for Jake Morrill. Jake Morrill's opening ball is a 3 drop. Jake Morrill seems to have a left-handed release that curves to the right, but it seems today he's having some trouble in which the curve is a little bit too intense and careens a little bit too much to the right. That's going to be an 8 box for Jake Morrill. For the 6 box, 60-6 for Jake Morrill. Here's some stats for you for Jake Morrill in case you need to see them. 61-79 for the season, 103.86 season average. We'll flip back to that in just a few moments when we have a couple of free seconds to spare. 7-10 split for Jake Morrill with favorable wood. That is looking good. Depending on where this wood lands, he might have a good chance at taking it out I would elect to aim towards the 7-pin, which is what Jake decided to do. And will it go? Is it going to give him? That's going to be a slow-moving spare. Jake Morrill was prepared to take his case to the Supreme Court if that wasn't going to go down, but that's a spare for Jake Morrill, the second mark of the game for him. That's an open 70-7 for Mr. Morrill, and now he will try to fill that spare. Misses the pocket just narrowly, but he gets an explosion of pins to help out with that fill, a fill of 8, leaving the 1 and the 7 pin on the deck. Let's see what Jake Morrill can do now. Said that slipped out of his fingers, just slightly. That happens in Candlepin. The slightest motions of the fingers can sometimes determine if you're going to get a mark or completely miss your target. And Jake will take an 8 box for that frame. 86 and 8 for Jake Morrill. Take a look at Jake Morrill's stats here. Season high 142, season high 570, 22 strikes, 105, spares 102, 10s. Jake Morrill will punch hard on the left side, taking out only the 4-pin. That hard ball he throws can be a little bit punishing at Leda lanes. And he completes the mirror image by taking out the 6-pin. I have a running theory that it's a temperature thing at Leda lanes. The colder it is, the more stiff everything is, from the balls down to the pins. Jake Morrill will take out everything but the 10-pin for a 9 box. 95 and 9 for Jake Morrill. As we are now moving to the 10th frame for Jake Morrill in the 3rd game of the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour Class B North match between Paul Metivier and Jake Morrill. Jake Morrill is from Bountless Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. And again, he punches out the left, the 2 and the 8 pins. Punch out, punch out, punch out. That seems to be the theme as of the past few minutes here. And Jake says he asks himself, what's that obsession with the right side of the deck there? And I agree, it's that curve that he's throwing with his left hand. It's a bit of an overthrow, I'd state. Takes 2 more out. That looks like it's going to be a 5 box. That's going to be 100 even in 10 for Jake Morrill. Scores all will be confirmed with the paper copy they've got down there. This is just the one that I'm keeping unofficially up here just for the sake of the stream. But it looks like Jake has 100 in 10. Paul Metivier has 43 and 5, so he has his work cut out for him for sure. Paul Metivier, lane 32, and he has a similar problem that Jake Morrill has, taking out just the 4-pin, overthrowing to the left this time, but beaning that 4-pin and taking nothing else. Metivier on lane 32. Right on the pocket, that's a spare. That was the shot he was looking for the first ball. Sometimes you need to have a really embarrassing first ball to have a really triumphant second ball. Let's look at Paul's stats. He's 4th in B North Division 3, season record 58-54, season average 106.2, high 136, high 581. Here's a fill on a spare. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to be a fill of 5 for Paul. 58 and 6. Let's see what he can do about this. Can he get 2 in a row? No, he's going to miss the head pin to the left. It was on track, but he threw it a little bit too hard. It was probably one of those situations where I think maybe if he had taken a little bit of edge off of that release, he probably would have gotten it. Something like that. Well, not exactly like that, because he takes all but the 9-pin for a 9 box. 67 and 7 for Paul. 3 boxes left to go for Paul Metivier here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour in the 3rd game of 5. The winner of each game takes 2 points, and the bowler that takes total pinfall takes 4 additional points for a maximum of 14 points if they sweep the other bowler. Paul Metivier drops 6 for his opening ball in lane 32. And he will take a spare right on the pocket for the remaining pins. Open 77 and 8 for Paul. Here's the man himself. He has a perfect box percentage of 45 with seasonal total pins of 42, 48. Paul Metivier. He's got an infectious smile in a lot of his photos. And I don't think he's going to have an infectious smile after that fill. He drops 2, taking out the 2 and the 8 for 79 and 8 on lane 32 in Leda lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Paul Metivier, he connects with the head pin, but it's not quite the spread he's looking for. He does take out some pins. That's leaving an awkward 3, 4, 5, and 7 pin split with a piece of wood on the 3 pin. He's going to take a 9 box after a disappointing 2 fill. 88 after 9 for Paul Metivier. With 1 to go, just needs to get to 100 or better to take points. But he needs a mark. Paul Metivier needs a mark. Sounds like a movie title. Paul Metivier, lane 32, he misfires a little bit, doesn't hit the head pin, but he takes out 6, leaving the 1, 3, 6, and 9 pins with a piece of wood sprawled out nearby. This next ball is critical for points in the game, and he's going to, oh no, he's going to miss. So, Jake Morrill will take the 3rd game. Jake Morrill takes games 1 and 3. Match lead is still getting passed around. Paul Metivier will take a 10. 98 for his 3rd game. And after 3 games, Jake Morrill's had a 3-game total of 306. Paul Metivier's had a 3-game total of 303. 3 pins separate our bowlers in terms of the match total difference. Jake took the 3rd game by only 2. Paul Metivier is down by 3 in the match in general. Both bowlers from Hurricane, they might be dropping down to the D division. I don't believe so. They're not doing that badly. But we're moving. And confirm that it is 198. Those were the scores Paul confirmed to me. So we're not falling behind in any capacity right now. Jake Morrill drops 6 on lane 31. Chops out another one. It looks like the 1, the 8 and the 9 pin, potentially. I might have that wrong. 6, not the 9 pin, the 6 pin. He leaves only the 6 pin for a 9 box. In his opening ball, the 4th game here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, you are watching Jake Morrill bowl on lane 31 right now. Record of 61 and 79 for the season. Season average of 103.86. He's averaged between 103 and 111.4 across all his matches so far. Seems to be having some trouble with some overthrowing today, and Leda lanes, that could be a little bit punishing if you throw a little bit too hard in the cold weather like this. Jake Morrill is 3rd place in B North Division 1, ahead of Rob Brown and behind John Alosa and Joe De Almeida as of January 8th. High single 142, high series 570. Jake Morrill is going to take a 9 box in the 2nd frame here of the 4th game. At Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. What can I tell you about Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire? Built in 1959, the same year as Lakeside Lanes in Manchester, New Hampshire. 36 lanes, all wood approaches, all wood lanes with a transitioning new automatic scoring system from Cubica AMF. BESX, I believe, is the scoring software. This used to be where WNDS Candlepin Stars and Strikes were filmed, actually on lanes 33 and 34, just slightly to the right of our bowlers today. And it is where Candlepin Skins is going to be filmed this Saturday. It's not going to be live streamed. It'll be taped for a future release date. And not to toot my own horn, but I am also bowling in that roll-off. Not roll-off, in that show, because I made the show. Hooray. I'm the number 2 seed. Jake Morrill still working on his 9-box streak. That's his 3rd 9 in a row, 27 after 3 for Mr. Morrill. Lane 31. But yes, if you're in Nashua, New Hampshire, do check out the Candlepin Skins taping this Saturday, starting, I believe, at 10 a.m. at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Guarantee it's going to be fun. You'll get to watch me bowl. I don't know how good I'm going to bowl, but you'll get to see me bowl and a bunch of other incredible bowlers, all things considered. Jake Morrill drops 5. Awkward split here. Connects with the pocket, but hits a little bit too full, leaving the 2, 4, and 10 pins on the deck. Morrill versus the 2, 4, and 10 pins. He's going to take an 8 box. For 35 and 4. 1 box to go before we switch over to Paul Metivier. The match total has been very, very, very close so far. Jake Morrill's taken 2 games. Paul Metivier's taken 1. And we're going to briefly pause for a lane clear. And finish my little spiel about Leda Lanes. Yes, it is the former home of WNDS Candlepin Stars and Strikes, in the midst of a bit of a renovation with brand new equipment that was taken from Park Place Lanes in Windham, New Hampshire when Park Place Lanes closed. Some very spiffy new red seats, as you can kind of see here in the shot that Paul is sitting on, and cubic AMF automatic scoring systems. The cool thing about this compared to the outgoing Pro Score systems is you can do score corrections right down at the lane. That system's not active today. We actually only have the lanes turned on with no electronic scoreboard other than just what you see on my screen here, which is just something I'm putting together in an Excel spreadsheet on my computer. Jake Morrill, lane 31, the 5, the 9, and the 10 pins. He takes out the 10 pin, leaving the 5 and the 9. 5-9. That'll be a 10 box for Jake Morrill, concluding his first half. First half with 45 after 5. Markless so far, just 8s, 9s, and 10s for Jake Morrill. This seems somewhat reminiscent of the second game. Jake had a bunch of strikes in the opposite games, but been having trouble getting things maintained during the gaps in between, as Paul Metivier starts on lane 31, dropping 6 to start out. Paul Metivier works a market basket. He's been there for 3 decades. He's from Nashua, New Hampshire. His home house is here. Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. High single 136, high series 581. That's going to be a 10 box for Paul Metivier to start the 4th game so far at Leda Lanes. Appreciate you checking out the stream. This is your first time watching such a stream. Welcome to the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. This is Candlepin Bowling. This is not 10-pin bowling. This is a regional variant of bowling that is almost entirely exclusive to New England and Canada. So if you're living in a different part of the United States, or the world for that matter, this type of bowling is probably somewhat strange looking to you, but I guarantee it's, I gotta say, it's definitely a lot more fun than 10-pin bowling. That's a 10 box for Paul Metivier. It is statistically a lower scoring game than 10-pin, but you have to work a lot harder to get those points. And one of the coolest things is no one has ever bowled a perfect 300 game in Candlepin for its entire existence. So every time you step up to bowl, there's always a chance that you might be the person that might do it. Paul Metivier punching out directly through the center, leaving a smattering of pins, the 3, 6, 9, 2, 4, and 7 pins on lane 31. Taking 3 more out, leaving only the 3 and the 6 pin on the deck. Paul Metivier has been struggling to find a mark. 8, 9, or 10 potential for Paul here. A frame in Candlepin is known as a box. You may have been noticing I've been using the lingo here and there. Paul Metivier just took a 9 box in the 3rd frame for 29 and 3. For Paul Metivier. It seems as if either there's a bad cap on at least one of the pins or there's a bad spot on the deck. That's why a pin appears to be falling over when the lane is reset, so every now and then we just have to fix it by resetting the lane once again, or respotting it. Paul Metivier drops 4 pins on lane 31, leaving a cluster of pins towards the middle. Metivier, lane 31, hits the head pin a little bit too full. The ball careens out of the other pin's general direction, leaving the 3, 5, and 6 pins. Taking out the 3 and the 6, he leaves only the 5. That's a 9 box for Paul Metivier, 38 after 4. Overtaking Jake Morrill by 3 at the same point in the game. Paul Metivier hasn't ever given up all 14 points in a single match, and he'll continue that trend today, as he's taken at least one game today. Dropping 6 in his first ball, 7 in his first ball, leaving the 3, the 6, and the 7 pins. Difficult shot, difficult spare to get. We'll see how Paul can work on this one. And that was a good try. He went for the 3 and the 6, hitting the 3 on the left side, but he didn't get enough bounce to take the 7 pin out. But he will take a 10 box, concluding his 5th with 48 after 5 for Paul Metivier. 48 after 5 for Paul Metivier versus 45 after 5 for Mr. Jake Morrill. Game lead is only 3. As of right now, it appears they are tied for the match at even points in the game at 3:51. We have a competitive match, folks. Both of our bowlers are definitely doing an excellent job at keeping competitive with one another.
One of his 8s was a 9.
Oh.
Which one was that?
The 8 box for him is a 9.
4. I have a 9.
4th, yeah.
Gotcha.
So 40, 46.
That good? Okay. Had one score correction to make, where this is the validation point, where I'm keeping a separate score behind the bowlers while they're keeping a paper copy. So one adjustment to make. Jake Morrill is up by 1 as of the even point of the 4th game, 5th box. Paul made sure that was correct. Jake Morrill aimed 32. He dropped 5. And then took 3 more for the road, leaving a 7-10 split with no wood. This is a very difficult shot to make in Candlepin when there's no wood. When there is wood, it's a little bit easier, but Jake gets a field goal. Can't give him 3 points, but how about 8? We'll give him 8. That's 54 and 6 for Jake Morrill. In the 6th box, 4th game. Appreciate you checking out this stream, this Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour Class B North match between Jake Morrill from Boutwell's Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire versus Paul Metivier from Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire, which is where we're streaming out of today. Jake Morrill drops 9, leaving all but the head pin, oddly enough. Didn't hit the head pin, but took everything else out around it. Jake Morrill versus the head pin, that's going to be a mark. First mark in a long time for either bowler. That's a spare for Jake Morrill, 64 in 7 open. For Jake Morrill. He's going to be filling that 64 from that 7th box with more than 5. It's going to be filling it with 6. 70 after 7 for Jake Morrill now. Jake Morrill had a lot of strikes in the first game. He had 3 strikes. Seemed like he was really coming alive, but since then it's been cooling down a little bit, but he does not cool down there. He gets another spare, punching through the 2, 4, 5, 7 split and taking it out. From what I reckon should be his first double spare of the game so far. You are watching Jake Morrill right now. 61 and 79 for the season. Filling a spare now. 2, 3. Wow, that pin really. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow. A 4 fill, I believe. Diamond center plus the 7 and 10. Taking out a few more. The 1, the 2, and the 5 pins left on the deck for Jake Morrill. 7, 8, 9, or 10 potential now. Taking one more out. A full shot on the head pin. Honestly, doesn't oddly sails through the 2 and the 5 pin. That's an 8 box for Jake Morrill. 92 in 9 for Mr. Morrill. 92 and 9 for Mr. Morrill. With 1 to go. Still the 4th game. 1 game to go after this. The total still up for grabs by either bowler at this point. They are very close to one another. Jake Morrill drops 7, leaving the 1, the 2, and the 4. Doesn't connect with the 1-2 pocket. Takes the 2 and the 4 out. Piece of wood gently rolls towards the head pin. Taps it lightly, but doesn't take it down. Head pin remaining. Misses it. Takes a 9 pin. 9 box, that is. For a 101 after 10 for Jake Morrill. And Paul Metivier now with a 48 after 5. Needs to get at least 1 or 2 marks to catch up to that 101. And he's got his work cut out for him. Work cut out for him. Metivier, lane 32. Impressive first ball, dropping 9, leaving all but the 6 pin. Single pin spare. It's not in the right side corner. He had difficulty with that last time. Let's see if he can go for it this time. And yes, he will take that spare right on the 6 pin for an open 58 and 6 for Paul Metivier. He'll be filling that open 58 with something. What is that something? Let's find out. Lane 32, right on the head pin, dropping 9. Leaving all but the 5 pin and a piece of wood. That was almost looking like a strike for a hot second. Paul Metivier working on a single pin spare. See if he can take out the 5 pin, and he's going to miss it. Oh no. I think he got the yips on that one, threw the ball a little bit too straight. He starts on the right side generally. There we go. That's the 3-ball spare. Unfortunately, I can only give him a 10 for that. 77 and 7 for Paul Metivier. What could have been 2 marks in a row to match Jake Morrill's double spare ended up just being a spare 9 fill and then a 10 box. A 10 box is something that you can't get in 10 pin because you get 3 boxes, 3 balls per box in Candlepin bowling. And think of it as like a spare with a 0 fill. Paul Metivier misses the head pin, but he gets a generous amount of pins falling in the background, leaving the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 7 pins. Hitting the 1-2 pocket or the 1-3 pocket will definitely take this out. Let's see what Paul Metivier can do. On the pocket, that is a spare. That was precisely as I drew it up in the playbook. Paul Metivier takes another spare. Could have been 3 spares in a row, but instead it's spare 10 spare. Open 87 and 8 for Paul Metivier. He might be back on track to catching up with Jake Morrill's 101 at the conclusion of this 4th game. Paul Metivier filling that spare with 8. It's going to be 8. 95 and 8 for Paul Metivier. I think it is getting safer and safer to say that I think he is going to be taking the 4th game, but we'll find out. Paul Metivier slides right. Didn't seem to make much of an influence on the pins, though. He hit a piece of wood and careened the wood and the ball away from the object pins. It's going to be an 8 box for Paul. That's 103 in 9. That is the victory. The victory action for Paul Metivier as of the 9th box. 103 versus Jake Morrill's 101. 103 plus a ball. Paul Metivier doesn't have the match lead. He's down by 1, but as long as he gets 1 or more, he will retake that match lead. Here we go. There's the match lead. Drops 7 so far. If he can get a mark, he might be able to store some bonus pins in case he has a disastrous 5th game, but we'll see. Paul Metivier going for a mark, and he hits a little bit too full on the head pin on that 1-3-6 spare opportunity. Hitting full on the 1 pin. 8, 9, or 10 now for Paul Metivier. Potential for 113. It's going to be a 113. 113 for Paul Metivier in the 4th. He has taken games 2 and 4. Both of our bowlers taking 2 games apiece so far. Paul Metivier now has the match lead by 9 and the game lead by 12. But those are just my unofficial scores. We'll confirm with Paul in just a moment here. And confirmed, 113-101, according to Paul. Keeping me honest, keeping them honest. Candlepin scoring is hard, especially when you're doing it all manually like this. So, if you're ever watching this and you say, hey, I can do better, you know, you might. I don't blame you. Maybe you will do better, but Sometimes it's just hard to do it live. Jake Morrill on lane 31. Chopping wood, chopping wood, chopping wood. After 2 balls, there's 3 pins left on the deck. 1, 3, and 5. And it's going to be a 7 box to start off the 5th game here. Jake Morrill, 407 after 4 games so far. Paul Metivier at 416 after 4 games. Very, very competitive match so far. So far, bowlers are dead even in terms of take-home points. They've both taken 2 games apiece. The winner of this 5th game will take an additional 2 pins, 2 points, that is. And whoever takes total for all 5 games will take an additional 4. So it's going to be interesting what this point spread is going to be. Neither bowler is going to leave with nothing. Both bowlers will take home at least 4 points apiece. So Jake Morrill will take a 10 box in the second frame of the 5th game. Here he's at 17 after 2. Your score update. Paul Metivier is at 0 after 2 because he hasn't bowled. Jake Morrill only has 23 out of 50 games under 100, not counting this match. As of January 8th, he's the 5th highest in total spares in the B class at 105 as of January 8th. He's number 7 in total 10 boxes in the B class with 102 as of January 8th. He is in the hunt for a wildcard spot. He needs to pass Joe De Almeida, Tony LeVake, Jeff Little, Dominic Palladino, Steve Kelly, Joe Rochelot, and Paul Metivier as of January 8th in order to get into the playoffs. So he still has some work to do. With the 10 pin remaining, he will take a 10 box. That'll be 27 after 3 for Jake Morrill. Recently, Jake Morrill bowled against JJ Turigny at Boutwell's Bowling Center in round 10, taking 4 points to JJ's 10. Every game was over 100 for Jake, totaling 565. He bowled great, but JJ just happened to bowl a little bit better, all things considered. JJ often can't be caught. He averaged 104.8 that match, 4 strikes, 12 spares, and 10 tens. His home house is Boutwell's Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. This is his first time at Leda Lanes today. And that is a spare for Jake Morrill, 37 after 4. Just making sure that was a spare. As I was talking, I lost count of how many balls are being thrown. My apologies about that. Jake Morrill filling a spare with more than 5, more than 6, more than 7. That's going to be an 8 fill. Dropping all but the 1 and the 4 pins. He didn't hit the pocket, but he had a nice explosive spread of pins. Piece of wood awkwardly between the 1 and the 4 pin. I don't know how that's going to shake out. If hopefully... Oh, he's not going to hit it anyway. He's going to take out the 4 pin only. Spare 8, 45 after 4 for Jake Morrill. Possible 55 after 5. It's going to be 54 after 5 because he's taking a 9 box. 54 after 5 for Jake Morrill. Good start. Paul Metivier has his work cut out for him. Needs at least 1 mark to stay competitive with a benchmark of 7 or higher for each frame. And it looks like we are going to be pausing for a ball return maintenance operation. Let's take a look at some stats. So that was Jake Morrill. As you can see, 61 for 75. He's got seasonal total pins of 51.93. Let's look at Paul Metivier's shining, smiling face right here. He is 4th place in B North Division 3. Again, that's a very competitive division right now. Season record of 58 and 54. Season average of 106.2. Seasonal high 136. Seasonal high 581. Still hunting for that mythical 600 high series. As Paul Metivier starts out on lane 31 at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. First half of the final game. First box. 6 drop. 3, 6, 10, 7 for Paul Metivier. This is a difficult shot to convert, but if you hit the 3-6 pocket, it might go. Doesn't look like we're going to exactly get that kind of action, though. He's going to connect with the 3-pin, but not much else. 3-pin still sitting in the middle of the deck. Still usable deadwood. He's going to take a 9 box after all is said and done. 9 box in the first frame. Paul Metivier. 9 after 1 versus Jake Morrill 7 after 1 at the same point in the game. Here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. This is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour from Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. We're about midway through the season. Paul Metivier is 58 and 54 for the season. Jake Morrill is 61 and 79 for the season. Those are point totals, win-loss ratios. Paul Metivier hits a little bit full on that 1, 2, 4, 7, 9 split, taking out the 1 and the 9, leaving the 2, the 4, and the 7 pins. Hitting the 2-4 pocket will take this out for a 10 box for Paul Metivier. He's going to take a 9 box. Misses the object pocket, but takes out all but 1 for 18 after 2. 18 after 2 for Paul Metivier versus 17 after 2 for Jake Morrill. Your score update. Thank you for watching this on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour Facebook page. Broadcasted live from Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire on Wednesday, January 10th, starting at 2:30 and available anytime afterwards via video on demand or playback or wherever you find this broadcast after the live recording concludes. Paul Metivier drops all but the 4 and the 5. Not much you can do about that. He takes out the 5 for the second ball, leaving only the 4 pin. Paul Metivier will take a 9 box, his third 9 box in a row for 27 after 3. Both bowlers are tied as of the third frame. And like I said, both these bowlers have been incredibly close today in terms of points, total, games, and matches. They both have 4 points apiece, but the 5th game is where things diverge, because now the 5th game, you're not only up for 2 points, you're also up for 4 points for the grand total. Whoever takes higher grand total takes 4 points on top of what they've already earned per game. Paul Metivier drops all but the 3 and the 9 with a piece of wood perpendicular to the 3. And it was a little bit too far out front, because that is precisely what happens if you hit a piece of wood that's perpendicular to a pin that is too far distant from the object pin. Especially at Leda Lanes. Paul Metivier hits full on the 3 and the 9 pins for a 10 box for 37 in 4, with 1 to go before we switch back to Jake Morrill at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Thank you for watching this, and I hope the vacuum cleaner behind me isn't too audible in this microphone. I think it should suppress most of it. I have the gain turned down quite a bit, but we'll see. Paul Metivier drops 5, leaving the 2, 4, 7, 6, and 10 on lane 31. Here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Let's zoom in on that, actually. Paul Metivier will sail a ball right through the middle, where he already got the pins. Can't award them twice. But hey, it is what it is. So he's got 5 plus. Paul Metivier will take out another 2 for a 7 box. It's another 2 for a 7 box for Mr. Paul Metivier for 44 in 5 versus Jake Morrill's 54 in 5. Jake Morrill is up in the game by 10 and up in the match by 1. These gaps are very small, which means that this is still anybody's game. Both bowlers have minimum of 4 points apiece today, but in terms of the final 6, that is up for grabs. Jake Morrill, lane 32, rolls a smoother ball with less of a curve on his left-handed release. Doesn't hit the head pin, but he takes out more pins than I think he was going to get if he missed right, leaving the 1, the 8, the 9, and the 10 pins. Taking out 2 more, he's left with the 8 and the 9 pins now. Doesn't sail a ball through the goalpost. He leaves the 8 and the 9 for an 8 box. For 62 and 6 for Jake Morrill. Jake Morrill is 3rd place in B North Division 1, ahead of Rob Brown, behind John Alosa, behind Joe De Almeida as of January 8th. Jake Morrill drops a few more. Not a lot for a first ball, but it's a few. Drops 3 specifically. But will he take the spare and connect with the pocket? He will. That's a remedial spare for Jake Morrill. 72 and 7 open. Definitely think he wanted that for his first ball. That might have been a strike if that was his first ball. Sometimes you need a nice little embarrassing warm-up ball to get a nice mark, follow-up mark. Jake Morrill on a spare. Pocket shot. First pocket shot on the first ball I've seen in a while from him. That's a 7 fill for Jake Morrill. 79 and 7. Let's see if he can get a follow-up spare. 2, 4, and 5 pins. A little bit too far to the right. Takes out the 5 pin and nothing else. 8, 9, or 10 for Jake Morrill on lane 32. It's going to be an 8 box. 87 in 8 for Mr. Jake Morrill. Just wouldn't be a league at Leda Lanes without Dave Simino getting on the microphone saying, "Attention bowlers, please finish your warm-up frames. We'll be changing the scoring in just a moment." Jake Morrill dropping 8, leaving the 6 and the 9. The 9 pin falling late, leaving only the 6. Dropping 9 on lane 32. The wood rolling around a little bit. Looks like it will be settling. And he will take that spare out. He thought he missed it. It was a very close near miss, but it wasn't a miss. That's a spare for Jake Morrill, 97 in 9. Plus a ball. Let's see what he can do about this fill now. Jake Morrill, lane 32. It's going to be more than, it's going to be 5. I was going to say more than 5, but there was a sleeper pin behind it. See that little sleeper pin behind the 4 horseman right side? That is the 9 pin. The 1, 3, 6, 10, and then the 9 pin right behind it. Let's see if he can take this out. And he does! That's a spare for Jake Morrill. Spare on a spare. Open 112 plus a ball. Open 112 plus a ball for Jake Morrill. He's had 4 spares this game so far. Well, not so far, just 4 spares this game. What an awkward fill that was. That was ugly. It was the right idea. It was just kind of an odd punch. 4 fill for Jake. That's going to be a 116 to conclude his 5th game. For a 5-game total of 523 for Jake Morrill, his first time at Leda Lanes. Not a bad way to start it out. Games 2 and 3 were slight weak spots, along with game 4, I'd say, but still, not a bad 5-game total for first time at a new house. Paul Metivier now, we'll see what he can do. He's at 460. Let's see if he can get to 523. Releases a little bit to the right of the head pin. Dropping 4, leaving the 1, the 2, the 4, the 8, the 6, and the 10. Taking 3 more for the road. He's left with the 4, the 6, and the 10 pins now for Paul Metivier. Trying to conclude his 6th box, first box of the second half. 106.2 average for the season for Paul Metivier as he takes a 9 box for 53 in 6. High single 136, high series 581. Yeah. 4,248 seasonal total pins for Paul Metivier thus far. Except for one game, he always totals above 500, and I think this match is going to be no exception. Well, provided he bowls a little bit better than that, he takes out the 2 and the 8 for a left side half Worcester on lane 32 in his opening ball of the 7th box. Metivier, oh no, he's going to sail right through that spot. That spot where the pins once stood. Oh, don't make a liar out of me, Paul. I wrote the stat just for you. He always totals above 500. You can't write this stuff, folks. That's a 2 box for Paul Metivier. And oh boy, so he sits at 471. He needs 29 to get to 500. Hope he gets there, but that actually puts the total possibly in Jake Morrill's favor unless Paul Metivier really starts cranking out the marks. That might have been a pivotal moment right there. Paul Metivier is still curving a little bit too far to the left, not as badly as he was for the left side half Worcester, but not enough to hit the pocket. He drops 5, 1, 3, 6, 10, and 8 pins. Lane 32. Second ball takes a few more out, leaving only the 1 and the 10 pins. Now Paul is working on an 8, 9, or 10 box, potentially. It's going to be a 9 box for Paul. 64 in 8, which is rather awkward to say. That's somewhat of a low score for the 8th box, especially given Paul's average of 106.2 for the season. I hope he can turn this around. Let's see what he can do. And we could always just get 4 strikes, but hey, let's see. That's a pocket shot. It's good improvement right there. Drop 7, hard fought 7, 6, 10, 7 on the deck with wood. Wood on the right side in front of the 6 and the 10 pins. And he tries to hit the wood, hoping that it would careen towards the 7, but the wood doesn't quite travel as far as we might hope it would. That's going to be a 9 box for Paul. And at this point, I believe the lead has become insurmountable. I believe Jake Morrill will be taking not only the game, but also the match. That will be an additional 6 points awarded to Jake Morrill for the 5th game now. Paul Metivier is trying to fight for a 500 5-game total at this point. Drops 7. He drops 8. Drops 8 after 1 ball with a lot of wood in between the 6 and the 10. Will he get that spare? He will get that spare. All right. Just trying to make sure he can get 1 more pin to maintain that stat of always totaling above 500 for Paul Metivier. Let's go, Paul. Let's get you over 500, buddy. Let's see how he does for the final ball of the 5th and final game. That's more than 1. All right, over 500. That's an 8 drop. And that puts him at 91 for a 5-game total of 507. And I will confirm these scores before I start talking about post-game stats. But at the moment, pending confirmation, Jake Morrill concludes the 5th game with 116. Paul Metivier concludes the 5th game with 91. And just waiting on the official paper scores from Morrill and Metivier to talk about stats and point distribution, but I think it's fairly safe to say that Jake Morrill will be coming out on top for this. Seems the bowlers are just kind of just talking to one another, so we'll just, in the meantime, we'll just talk about the unofficial stats then until we confirm that they are correct. But in the meantime, so Jake Morrill goes from 61 and 79 to 71 and 83. Paul Metivier falls from 58-54 to 62-64. Jake Morrill taking home 10 points for the day. Paul Metivier taking home 4 points for the day. Jake Morrill pulling ahead with the match total, with the grand total being 523 versus Paul Metivier's 507. And then for those of you who like additional stats, we also have strikes, spares, 10s. Jake Morrill definitely had a banner day with 4 strikes, 7 spares, and 9 10s with a perfect box percentage of roughly 40, give or take. Paul Metivier had a higher perfect box percentage, but had 0 strikes, 9 spares, and 14 10s. Really interesting stat distribution there. But anyways, that should about do it for us here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Your final score for the final time, Jake Morrill 523 versus Paul Metivier's 507. Folks, it has been an absolute pleasure delivering this match broadcast to you from Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. That will be it from us today at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. If you're new to the world of Candlepin bowling content, thanks for giving this content a try. And if you enjoyed what you saw, I invite you to strike, comment, and subscribe to the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour page on Facebook, as well as Alley Chat, Candlepin Corner, and Candlepin Bowling Network, where all kinds of other videos and streams are regularly posted, in addition to results and statistics. If you're a returning viewer, it's great to have you along once again, and hope you've enjoyed this program. And if you're into podcasts, there's also Candlepin shows such as The Approach and Ripping the Rack. So check those out if you feel so inclined. I've been Steve Kelly along with Jake Morrill and Paul Metivier, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Have a great week, everybody.